This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Bret Baier in Washington. Stocks surged today, just hours after President Trump's first speech to Congress. 2 days doing that. Optimism prevailed on Wall Street as the Dow blasted through the 21,000 mark, and all three major indices set closing records. The Dow gained 303, the S&P 500 was up 32, the Nasdaq finished ahead 79. Businesses are reacting positively to the news from President Trump's money man that a massive infrastructure package and tax reform coming this year.
Our objective is to pass tax reform by the August recess, and I think that's a very aggressive timetable, but realistic and something that the President and I are very committed to doing.
So by August, voted, done, agreed.
And signed.
Let's bring in Trish Regan from Fox Business Network in New York. So was this Wall Street surge in reaction to an endorsement of President Trump's agenda in that speech last night?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Wall Street wants tax cuts. Wall Street wants the infrastructure spend. And importantly here, Bret, Wall Street now believes, with a certain amount of certainty, they put money on the line here, that it can, in fact, and will get done. And so that's what's critical. He came forward last night with a very pro-business agenda, a very positive, optimistic agenda. And so you have the market reacting to that alongside, of course, what Steve Mnuchin, Treasury Secretary, told our own Neil Cavuto, that in fact these tax cuts will happen, signed, sealed, and delivered in August. So they are now on record with that. There's also a lot of optimism in general out there, and this is psychologically important. When you bust through a level like 21,000, it starts to say to people and to investors overall that maybe haven't joined the party, okay, I need to get on board. This market is taking off, and there is a fundamental optimism that exists within the marketplace itself. So this is a very positive thing to see for us, for our economy and our markets.
So are there concerns, though, that the market might be getting ahead of itself? What if these policies, these packages don't get through Congress as expected or hopeful?
Yeah, it's a very fair question and a very fair point, and I would say that the Bears are making this and stressing this argument that, you know, he may not be able to get everything done, and if he can't get everything done, then perhaps this market is too richly valued. In other words, people are betting on the future here, and they are betting with a certain amount of certainty that this, in fact, is going to happen. Tax cuts and infrastructure spend. If it doesn't, they have to reevaluate everything. But again, assuming it does, this is going to be fundamentally good for companies because they will have that much in the way of earnings, more coming in, and that enhances their overall valuation, thus the higher price in the stock market.
And we'll watch the Fed rates and their decision as well. Yes. Trish, as always, thank you. Now about that speech. The reviews, largely positive and predictable. House Speaker Paul Ryan called it a home run. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi said it was a bait-and-switch speech. President Trump advocating for a new health care plan. We will talk live with HHS Secretary Tom Price here in studio about that in just a few minutes. The president also spoke at length about immigration and national security. We are told the president's next executive order on those subjects has been pushed back a bit. Let's start off tonight with that news. And Chief White House correspondent John Roberts on the North Lawn. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. The speech last night has been described as a pivot point for President Trump in terms of tone, but it also marks a transition from the days of executive action now to the difficult business of crafting and passing legislation.
Thank you very much. We're just here to start the process. It begins as of now, and we think we're going to have tremendous success. And thank you very much.
President Trump set the table with his speech last night. Today it was time to eat. A lunch meeting with Republican leaders to chew over the bold agenda the president outlined to Congress.
Dying industries will come roaring back to life. Heroic veterans will get the care they so desperately need. Our military will be given the resources its brave warriors so richly deserve. Crumbling infrastructure will be replaced with new roads, bridges, tunnels, airports, and railways gleaming across our very, very beautiful land.
If the president hopes to win re-election 3 years and 8 months from now, he'll need to make good on at least a few of those promises. That will require drive and discipline from the Republican leadership, particularly since Democrats don't seem inclined to jump on board what the president was selling.
He's given a whole lot of speeches, and we've seen that the speeches and the reality don't match. I'll say yes when he comes up with something that really helps working people and says, I want to work with Democrats. Here's my proposal.
So this was Steve Bannon on steroids with a smile.
Steve Bannon is the president's chief strategist and co-writer of both last night's speech and the much darker inaugural address. Last night, President Trump was far less divisive than in speeches past, more the deal maker than the slash and burn politics of the campaign, even reaching out to Congress to tackle immigration reform.
I believe that real and positive immigration reform is possible. If we are guided by the well-being of American citizens, then I believe Republicans and Democrats can work together to achieve an outcome that has eluded our country for decades.
But what the president said last night was far less than what he teased in a lunch with network anchors hours earlier, where he suggested he may be open to a path to legal status for many illegal immigrants and possible citizenship for the so-called dreamers.
Yesterday, he has these cosmopolitan reporters in, and he says, oh, maybe we'll do something on immigration. And then at night, he gives a virulently anti-immigration speech.
While Democrats complained, President Trump received generally high marks for the speech. Not wanting to sour the afterglow, the White House put off signing a new executive order on the immigration ban today. Now it likely won't happen until next week. And the White House has made another change to the pending order, adjusting Iraq's status in the list of 7 nations included in the temporary visa ban. Fox News has learned that while Iraq won't be totally removed from the list, it will be placed in a, quote, different category.
Fox News has also learned tonight that at the request of the Senate and the House Intelligence Committees, the White House counsel last week sent out a pro forma letter to White House staff asking them to preserve any materials that may be related to communications with Russian officials. But as we remind you of that, Bret, the FBI, you'll recall, told the Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus, a couple of weeks ago that there was no evidence that anyone at the White House other than Michael Flynn may have had contact with Russian officials. Bret?
John Roberts, live in the North Lawn, home to President Trump. John, thanks. And a note of thanks to you. Nielsen Media Research says you helped make Fox News Channel the most watched channel in all of television. For last night's coverage of President Trump's address, we had 10.7 million total viewers, more than any other television network. Thank you for watching. One of the big questions tonight, did President Trump's outline of a plan to repeal and replace Obamacare unify Republican lawmakers who have been divided on the proposal so far? Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live tonight on Capitol Hill. Good evening, Mike.
Bret, good evening. Late today, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell held a Republican members-only meeting to try to get all on the same page with the president on health care.
It must be the plan they want, not the plan forced on them by our government.
With Congress wrestling with repealing and replacing Obamacare, President Trump provided lawmakers with some direction.
We should help Americans purchase their own coverage through the use of tax credits and expanded health savings accounts.
However, Senators Ted Cruz of Texas, Mike Lee of Utah, and Rand Paul of Kentucky have all said they're opposed to offering tax credits to help Americans buy insurance.
People are trying to make it too elaborate now, and they're adding in some government programs that I object to. So, for example, if you give people back money that they did not pay in taxes, that is basically an entitlement program.
House Chairman Greg Walden from Energy and Commerce and Kevin Brady from Ways and Means were asked to defend the tax credit idea in front of senators. Some moderates have said they won't back a bill that rolls back the Obamacare Medicaid expansion, which covers an estimated 11 million Americans. Others are downplaying GOP differences.
This notion that because there's 5 different ideas about it, that's a sign of weakness is ridiculous. Should we all be marching like robots in lockstep, listening to whatever they mandate down our throat?
Some things take a little while to get right. We have legislation. What we're doing now is not arguing over how you want to go a certain direction.
Democrats don't sound eager to help.
So You want to sit down and talk? Let's see what your plans are. See if you can get your own act together before you're pointing the finger at Democrats.
Top GOP leaders continue to insist they must act.
Americans were promised costs would go down, but of course they went up. Americans were promised more choice, but they got less. Americans were promised they could keep their plans, but that was a broken promise as well.
Part of the pitch to Republicans is either you're for the status quo Obamacare or you're going to keep a campaign pledge you've made for years and will vote to repeal and replace it. Brett?
Mike Emanuel in Statuary Hall. Mike, thank you. Joining us tonight to talk about the repeal and replace effort on Obamacare is the president's point man on this project. Tom Price is Secretary of Health and Human Services. He's also an orthopedic surgeon and was one of the leading Obamacare critics in the House. Secretary Price, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, Brett. Good to be with you again.
I heard you say to one of our colleagues, we look forward to coming up with a product. After hearing President Trump at the speech about all that needs to be done, and he says will be done, how far away are you?
Oh, I think we're getting very, very close. We've got good input from all individuals across the Hill. The president last night, I thought he did just a remarkable job in laying out the challenge that we have where we are right now. That is that plans are costing too much, they're providing too little care, and that it's only getting worse, and that where we want to move is in a direction that allows individuals to purchase their own coverage and have a transition from where we are right now to something that actually works for folks, whether it's buying across state lines or the like. So there's unanimity on the principles, and now we got to get down to the specifics.
Are Republicans singing from the same sheet of music? It sounds up on Capitol Hill that they're not yet. Are you going to bless a certain product, a certain plan, or are you going to kind of hand over the keys and say, you guys figure this out?
Well, as the president said last night, that we need to make certain that coverage is affordable for folks, that across state lines, purchase for insurance coverage is important, that we have some type of lawsuit abuse reform, medical malpractice reform, that we have a transition phase that works and flexibility for the states. Those are the kinds of things that we certainly agree on. Now, the principles of having a system that's affordable for folks, accessible for folks, that's of the highest quality, and choices, and empowering patients, those are the things that we're working toward. Now, the specifics, this, as one of the individuals mentioned, this is what the legislative process looks like. This isn't anything unusual.
Right, but you have Republicans like Raul Labrador of Idaho saying the Speaker's Better Way agenda on this is talking points, not a bill, saying that the specifics are the crucial part.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's just break down some specifics. You're talking about expanding the health savings accounts.
Absolutely. And the reason to do that is to allow individuals to purchase the kind of coverage that they want, not that the government forces them to buy. I thought the president was very powerful on this last night, and he clearly said that no longer should the government be dictating to the American people what kind of health coverage they ought to buy. So expanding health savings accounts is one of the things that works very well for a lot of the population, especially younger individuals and people just entering the job market.
Now, pre-existing conditions. You do with catastrophic pools, right?
Laid out the issue that nobody ought to lose their health insurance coverage because they get a bad diagnosis or they have a pre-existing condition. We've believed that for the time that we've been talking about this. But the challenge is if you require individuals to purchase what the government tells them they've got to require, then they don't have the flexibility to purchase something that actually works for them and their family in a unique way, because every individual in this entire process is unique. One size doesn't fit all.
Listen to Democrats on this and what they're saying about your efforts here.
They are pushing forward with a reckless repeal of the Affordable Care Act, which would rip apart our health care system and take coverage away from millions of families.
I thought that the Republican leaders in their hearts were hoping he was going to lay out a path. He hasn't. Their party is divided on Obamacare.
You look at some recent polls, Mr. Secretary. Pew, in the approval opinion of Obamacare, approved 54%, disapproved 43%. Fox News, it has evolved also, the favorable to 50%. And you can take a look at the chart of the Real Clear Politics average. That has changed as well. I think there are people who are worried that they're going to lose what they have through Obamacare. Can you say that the coverage numbers are going to be as high as currently are being covered?
This is a really important question because right now the coverage numbers through the Affordable Care Act, through the law that we have in place, are going down. The status quo is not acceptable, and that's what our friends on the other side of the aisle don't seem to appreciate. We've got one-third of the states, one-third of the counties in this nation that are only offering one insurance plan. 5 states have only one insurance plan. There are counties in a number of states that have no coverage available to them right now. That's through the Affordable Care Act. So the baseline that we have right here, the status quo, is not working for the American people. Premiums are going up, deductibles are going up, and access to coverage is going down. So if you compare our plan as we move forward to the actual current law that we have and the downward trend that we have in people being able to be covered, I think we will show very, very well.
You have some power now as Secretary in a regulatory way to unwind some of this on your own without Congress. Are you doing that? Is that started?
This is a really important question as well, because you remember that all the portions of the bill that said the Secretary shall, the Secretary may, hundreds of regulations that the previous administration put forward. Our goal is to look at every single one of those regulations and say, does this help patients? Does it hurt patients? Does it make it so the insurance costs more or costs less? If it costs less for individuals and if it helps patients, then we want to continue those. But if it hurts patients and it costs more, then we want to make certain that we're looking at those and either repeal them or change them in a way that will make it work for patients.
You've mentioned the coverage. You believe that it will insure more people. Will their costs go down, and how do they go down?
Well, they have to go down if you allow the individual and small group market to be reconstituted. Remember, we're not talking about the folks who get their coverage through their employer right now. That's 175 million individuals across this country, and that market is relatively stable, although being challenged because of the Affordable Care Act. We're not talking about Medicare. There are challenges there, but that's not part of this conversation. We're talking about the individual and small group market, and there are about 4 million individuals who gain coverage through the Affordable Care Act, the current law, that didn't have it before. But the problem is that we've turned the whole insurance market upside down for those individuals and small groups and made it so it's more expensive, it's providing less care, and it's only getting worse. So we believe that it's imperative to fix that problem.
When the governors came in, and you're talking about possibly block granting on Medicaid, didn't they come in and say, you know what, maybe this isn't going to work? I mean, didn't that throw a wrench into the kind of plan?
I had wonderful meetings with governors from all across this nation, both Republican and Democrat. And what I heard was that if you give our state, if you give me the opportunity, the governor, to be able to fashion their program in the way that best meets the citizens of their state, then we would gladly welcome that, because they know that the dictates that come down from Washington make it that much more difficult for them to care for them to provide coverage for their citizens.
You know the criticism that Republicans have been talking about this for a long time and have not herded the cats around one plan. And I want to play the soundbite because we've been talking about it for a long time. This is Congressman Price, December 2013.
I do know that what we need is an alternative that doesn't have Washington in charge, and that's what we embrace. A plan that puts, again, patients and families and doctors in charge and provides individuals the opportunity and the financial feasibility to purchase that coverage.
You can say tonight that that is a priority for the Republican leadership after the first of the year.
Priority for the Republican leadership, as stated to us, is to have the Republican conference in the House to coalesce and unify around a health plan.
I look younger, but the
pretty wise guy there talking.
But it never happened. It didn't happen.
But
there wasn't one plan.
You know how this town works, Brett. I mean, things don't happen until they have to happen, and now they have to happen. The president is absolutely committed to repealing and replacing Obamacare because it's not working for the American people. That's why. The Congress understands that, and we'll work through this and make it happen.
And you're confident?
Absolutely.
Mr. Secretary, we'd love to have you back.
Thank you. Look forward to it.
Thank you. Up next, President Trump lays out an ambitious agenda, but how is he going to pay for all of it? We'll get into that. First, what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 32 in Chicago has National Weather Service survey teams move across Illinois to determine the number of tornadoes that hit that state overnight. Authorities say 3 people died in the Midwest. Governor Bruce Rauner surveyed the damage today. The storm system is now heading east. Fox 33 in Shreveport, Louisiana, with a spectacular end to a high-speed chase. Watch this. Happened in West Webster Parish. A man who walked off a work release program apparently stole a vehicle and was speeding 115 miles an hour. Eventually he hits the spike strips and goes airborne there. Lands on the roof of the car. No serious injuries. Hard to believe. The driver is now in custody. And this is a live look at Dallas from our affiliate Fox 4. The big story there tonight, former President George W. Bush with a new art exhibit at his presidential center. 66 paintings of American service members who have suffered wounds of war. The president's paintings are being accompanied by a new book. All the profits go to support his military service initiative. He talked with Sean Hannity about it just the other night. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. President Trump has said he wants a federal government that is lean and accountable. He is calling for big defense spending increases, but no cuts in entitlements. Is that possible? Correspondent Kevin Corke examines that tonight from the White House.
Everything that is broken in our country can be fixed. Every problem can be solved.
It may not have been the most memorable line of the president's address to the joint session of Congress, but in many ways it summed up his plan to tackle some of the most pressing challenges facing the country.
From now on, America will be empowered by our aspirations, not burdened by our fears. Inspired by the future, not bound by failures of the past, and guided by a vision, not blinded by our doubts.
A vision that would focus on slashing discretionary spending on the one hand, while on the other, enhancing what the White House calls much-needed investments. The president's priorities include a sustainable replacement for Obamacare that drives down cost by giving consumers tax credits and by increasing competition across state lines. $1 trillion in public-private investment in new infrastructure to create jobs, a $54 billion boost in military spending, and a border wall that some experts suggest could cost upwards of $25 billion. All of it without reducing Medicare or Social Security. To pay for it, the president has proposed a wide array of middle-class and business tax cuts and reworked trade deals to stimulate economic growth. Additionally, the administration would slash budgets at the EPA, State Department, and USAID. The problem? The numbers simply don't add up, to say nothing of getting cost-conscious Republican lawmakers on Capitol Hill to go along. Even experts question the math.
It really focuses on the political desirability of all of these things instead of the economic reality of some of the challenges that we actually face. What we need to do is get our economy growing, and you cannot do that by borrowing your way to prosperity.
Bret, the president says he'd like to see the U.S. growth rate hit a target of about 3% by the end of fiscal 2018. However, it's important to point out that is a much, much higher rate than current CBO estimates. Bret?
Kevin Corke in the White House briefing room. Kevin, thank you. One of the policies President Trump pushed hard, his foreign policy view of America first. But he's also talking about adding new allies, and that has some in Congress a little concerned. Correspondent Rich Edson tells us why tonight from the State Department.
The United States will once again lead its allies as it rebuilds its military and withdraws billions in foreign aid. That's President Donald Trump's message to Congress and the world.
America is willing to find new friends and to forge new partnerships where shared interests align. America is friends today with former enemies.
Though some Republicans and Democrats say they worry about a closer relationship with Russia.
How can we expect him to keep our citizens safe and protect our democracy if he will criticize all of our friends around the globe, but continues to praise Russia and Vladimir Putin?
Despite a potential partnership, the U.S. and Russia remain divided over major issues like fighting in Ukraine and the war in Syria. The Trump administration has also pledged stronger relationships with what it calls traditional U.S. allies, partner Arab countries, and Israel.
Our unbreakable alliance with the State of Israel.
The U.S. has also said it is reviewing its participation in the UN Human Rights Council because of the Council's condemnations of Israel.
The obsession with Israel through Agenda Item 7 is the largest threat to this Council's credibility. It limits the good we can accomplish by making a mockery of this Council. The United States will oppose any effort to delegitimize or isolate Israel.
And the Trump administration is demanding more from European allies, pushing fellow NATO countries to boost their defense spending and rely less on the U.S. military.
We expect our partners, whether in NATO, the Middle East, or in the Pacific, to take a direct and meaningful role in both strategic and military operations and pay their fair share of the cost.
While some NATO allies have spent more on their militaries, Germany's foreign minister said earlier today if his country, a NATO member, spent more on its military, it would give Germany military supremacy in Europe. Bret?
Thanks, Rich. Let's talk more now about the investigation into alleged ties between the Trump campaign and Russia. Congressman Devin Nunes of California is chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Mr. Chairman, thanks for being here. I heard you talk about this and what you've said. I kind of want to just button it up. Where are you right now? What do you know? What do you not know?
Well, we just signed a scoping document with the Democrats as to what we're going to look at involving the Russian investigation. Mr. Schiff and I, the ranking Democrat, have received briefings from high-ranking IC officials. We expect to brief our full committee tomorrow and probably also next week, get briefings from the IC. But I always take people back to the House Intelligence Committee has long had an investigation into Russia. And in fact, a year ago, I went out and called the failure to understand Putin's plans and intentions the largest failure since 9/11, the largest intelligence failure since 9/11, and the last administration didn't do anything about it.
Speaker Ryan pointed to the report done by former DNI Clapper and former CIA Director Brennan that was handed over and briefed about this very topic, and that there was not an indication of collusion, collaboration, or communication beyond Michael Flynn. Can you go beyond that?
That still is the case from the briefing. So we've had briefings since then, and that still is the case. We will see if we get new evidence this week or next week. But in terms of what really got this going is 3 American names were in a New York Times story about 2 weeks ago. And that's what started this going, is to, are you going to bring in these Americans to testify? And what I said was, no, absolutely not. We're not going to bring American citizens in just because they show up in a New York Times story, or any other story for that matter, if we don't have any evidence. And all of a sudden, everybody on the left got excited about that. But, you know, I think I want to caution people that we should not be bringing in American citizens if we don't have any evidence to bring them in on. And I've said this really smells of McCarthyism.
So Congressman Schiff says he needs cooperation from the FBI and needs to know what they're chasing down. Do you feel like you have that?
Well, I think we do, but Mr. Schiff and I are holding the FBI accountable. They have a lot of answers that we've requested, that there are questions that we've asked that they owe us answers to, and we'll begin to get those tomorrow.
Okay. We will follow this investigation, obviously, the House and the Senate looking into it. I want to turn to another intelligence issue that you talked about numerous times, and that is the declassification of these documents that were captured at the bin Laden raid. Still, we don't have the treasure trove that has been there for years.
Yeah, well, it's worse than that. On January 19th, the DNI sent out a report that said that they had met the law, and that was all the documents that they were going to release, which is totally unacceptable. So there are thousands and thousands of documents that are about what bin Laden knew, when he knew it, what he was doing with al-Qaeda. And why is this important? Because we need to understand our enemy. And a lot of people forget this, but ISIS is an outgrowth of al-Qaeda. ISIS leaders were al-Qaeda and Iraq leaders. And so for the intelligence community to continue to keep these from important people like historians, like the Congress, like the American public, is totally unacceptable. And so I'm hoping that President Trump will get these documents out immediately, because the longer these stay hidden, the less we know about our enemy.
And he can do that quickly, can't he?
He should be able to do it quickly. And you know, you heard the president last night. He is finally calling an enemy for what they are, which are their radical Islamic terrorists. And we need to understand what's behind radical Islamic terrorism. And to know that, we need to know what their leader was up to for the 5-6 years he was in hiding.
And finally, speaking about the president, the speech last night, I'd like to get your thoughts. You've been working specifically on tax reform as well and health care, but your thoughts overall and pushing those big things across the finish line in Congress?
Well, what I look for is somebody who's new in politics as you look for growth. And what I've seen is the president's working very, very hard. Every day he gets more and more up to speed on the important policy issues. So if you go back to right after the election, he had a lot of things that he wanted to do. Now he's very focused. He's very focused on telling the Congress, look, we've got to get health care done. We've got to get Obamacare repealed and replaced. He was very specific on that last night. And second, he talked about specifics with tax reform. And so, the key to tax reform is going to be to make sure that the administration knows that we, for 10 years, a decade really, have looked at every way to use the existing tax code the way it is and try to tinker with it, cut the rates a little bit. We can't get there without blowing a hole in the deficit. This is why what we're trying to do is fundamental reform, and that's the bill that Chairman Brady's working on along with Paul Ryan. We've worked on this for a long time. This is the first chance we've ever had to truly blow up the tax code to where we would to have a cash flow system where we'd have rates of 25% and 20%, and people could write off expenses immediately. This is a much-needed policy change, and the president has talked big, and he can help us make this happen.
And we heard Neil Cavuto with the Treasury Secretary saying they have confidence that they're going to get it done and signed in August. You buy that?
The sooner we can get it done, the better.
But, I mean, do you think it can?
Well, in terms of this is going to be the challenge. We've been working on this for a long time at the Ways and Means Committee, so we have an understanding of tax policy, and we know kind of what the different plans are and why the other plans don't work. The challenge will be to get the White House staff up to speed on this, why we need to do it this way, and then it will be to get the Senate, because in the Senate, as you know, we only have 52 votes, so we're going to have to convince all the senators that this is the direction that we need to go. And what I would say is if they're not going to do this plan, then they have to tell us what plan they want to use.
By August, I'm saying. Yes?
I'm hopeful, yeah. A lot of education has to occur, which is part of the reason why I'm coming on your show and talking about tax reform.
Okay, talked about a lot of things. Congressman Nunes, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
President Trump delays his revised travel ban rollout, perhaps after the positive reviews from his address last night. We'll talk about all the fallout and what's next with the panel after a break.
Asking all members of Congress to join me in dreaming big and bold and daring things for our country.
It was great to see even my friend, the Democratic leader, occasionally applauding the president. I know the far left is pressuring them to burn the place down because it can't accept the results of last year's election.
A speech isn't going to create one job or one infrastructure plan or one trade law. You want to sit down and talk? Let's see what your plans are. See if you can get your own act together before you're pointing the finger at Democrats.
All right, some of the fallout today, but the big fallout happened at the market. The Dow, if you take a look at this chart, since the election, now crossing 21,000 today for the first time. And people on Wall Street saying the optimistic tone, the thought that tax reform, maybe even infrastructure could be coming down the pike here on Capitol Hill is fueling some optimism on the markets. Let's bring in our panel. Tom Bevan, Real Clear Politics co-founder and publisher. Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Tom, what do you think? The fallout of the speech, what you heard today on all sides after President Trump's address?
Easily his best news day, I think, since he took office. He sort of had these glowing reviews of his speech pretty much across the political spectrum. He managed not to step on his own good news day. I think he tweeted one time early this morning, "Thank you," and that was it, which is another seeming change for him. We've seen him do that a few times here since he took office. And then coupled with the run-up in the Dow, new high there, this was, again, is easily his best news day so far.
Okay, let's listen to the Treasury Secretary and then what you just heard from Devin Nunes.
Our objective is to pass tax reform by the August recess, and I think that's a very aggressive timetable, but realistic and something that the President and I are very committed to doing.
So by August, voted, done, agreed.
And signed.
By August, I'm saying. Yes?
I'm hopeful, yeah. A lot of education has to occur, which is part of the reason why I'm coming on your show and talking about tax reform.
A little different optimism of hopeful versus it's happening signed.
Yeah, well, it's also interesting how for the last month we've had opponents of President Trump paint this administration as so chaotic, so unhinged, that he is unstable and dangerous. What you saw yesterday was a man give a speech that wasn't just presidential, but in many ways it appealed to people more than even some of his predecessors. There is an understanding, too, from this administration that so long as they keep focused on jobs, on the economy, they understand that the weakness of the Obama economy was a big motivating factor in people voting for President Trump, and that if they want to have any hope of having a successful agenda, they need to be laser focused on that. Hopefully it will happen on that timetable that they propose.
Ambitious.
Yes, but I think it can be done. Of course, they've got to get Obamacare out of the way because it determines how the other ultimate tax reform ends up. But I think one of the reasons for the euphoria in the markets is not just the thought that they're going to get this or that reform passed, but I think it refers to what Molly was talking about. For the last month, you've got the impression that this administration was teetering on the edge, about to explode, just waiting for the fuse to go. And then you see this guy who shows up. This is a new guy who showed up last night. Presidential, sober, responsible, and I know it's a low bar, but with complete impulse control. You'd sort of expect that in a president, but there have been reasons to doubt it. And then people think, well, maybe the critics and the people who've been so worried that this cannot continue are beginning to look a little bit silly. Maybe he can turn the corner. I think it's that sense of stability and sobriety which is what helped the markets to say, well, this is a presidency we can count on, and we don't expect to see carnage.
You know, Tom, there was this moment in the lunch with the anchors yesterday where President Trump said that he was considering comprehensive immigration reform and was going to maybe put it in the speech. And he told somebody to write it down. And then he gave us an on-the-record quote that said that the time is right for immigration reform if both sides can compromise. And it was pretty detailed in the questioning and answers during that time. The speech didn't reflect that, obviously.
No, in some ways this is classic Trump. You know, he'll say one thing and a couple hours later, he didn't actually say something different. And if you listen to the speech he said, he did give a nod to Democrats and Republicans, right, working together to accomplish something that hasn't been done in decades. This is a problem that has bedeviled this town for decades. And so in that sense, he was sort of hinting at it, but certainly not in the same way that he had done just hours earlier.
Yeah, and to be fair, they didn't say definitively that it was going to be in the speech in detail. And the other thing is, Molly, when people say, you know, there were no details, no specifics, these speeches are never that specific on, you know, very minute details of a lot of these programs.
Yeah, and also, though, I think that there has been a consistency to what President Trump has talked about. I mean, he was talking about immigration in a way that was not that different than how he spoke during the campaign, and I'm a little surprised that people are acting like it is so different. When he gave his speech after visiting Mexico, he talked about a merit-based immigration system. At that time, it sounded very much like Canada's immigration policies. Last night, it was the same. It's not totally detailed, and everything comes down to the details.
What he said at the lunch was definitively different in that dreamers don't have anything to worry about. Maybe there's a path to citizenship for dreamers. Maybe there's a legalization for others. I mean, those are things that the red alarm bells go off, that's news.
Well, at the same time, it seems that he has a rhetorical strategy of being extreme when he's speaking publicly with a willingness to negotiate. And so what he's saying, there will be some flexibility.
That's diplomatic.
Look, if you had a Martian drop out of the sky and ask him to draw up the perfect solution to illegal immigrants, he would come up with something roughly like what you heard from the president, where you can tell he's sympathetic to the dreamers. He's not going to kick them out. And he's adding to that a path for legalization, not citizenship for adults, and, of course, the border wall and all the border enforcement. That's been out there, lying on the table for at least a decade. And I think it's not, the reason I think it was left out of the speech, there's only so much that a new president can ask of the people in his own party to give up and compromise. There are going to be huge compromises on Obamacare and on tax reform. So he's asking them to go way out on a limb to give up a lot of stuff they have campaigned on and have sworn as a matter of principle. You don't want to add on to that immigration reform, which in any case is not going to be enacted in this year anyway. But I think it's a good idea to leave it out there as aspirational.
Meantime, the executive order pushed back a little bit, and we're told that of the 7 countries that were of concern, they're taking off one of the countries, Iraq. Do you think that this has to do with kind of the bounce after the speech, or more about the logistics of the executive order?
No, I think this is another perhaps sign that the Trump administration, the Trump White House is sort of getting their sea legs and learning some lessons. And one of those was punting this and not, again, giving the media, stepping on your message and reigniting this controversy and giving, you know, critics and folks in the media something else to write about. They just kind of, they punted it down the road, and the message, the story today, again, was, you know, his speech. It was this love fest with the GOP lunch and the Dow.
But it completely undermines the rationale they gave for the original executive order, which is we have to do this right away, no warning, because the bad hombres out there are just waiting to come in. Well, the bad hombres out there have had a lot of weeks now to come in. They're going to have more. It obviously was a post facto excuse that held no water, and I would not be surprised if they water this down to the point where it's quite meaningless.
Last thing, Molly. Can, in the sequence of things, can Capitol Hill absorb dealing with Obamacare, repeal and replace, tax reform, and infrastructure in 2017?
That is quite a bit to handle, and there's not a lot of indication that the Hill is prepared for handling one of those things particularly well, much less all 3. They need to work on it.
I agree. Next up, we'll talk about what we heard during my interview with Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price on that effort to repeal and replace Obamacare.
We are certainly prepared to work together with our Republican colleagues to make the Affordable Care Act work better. But repealing it is not an option.
Yes, we need to improve it. It is not perfect. There are many things you can do to improve it, but blowing it up and starting again would be catastrophic for the people of the state of Maryland.
The status quo is not working for the American people. Premiums are going up, deductibles are going up, and access to coverage is going down.
You heard Secretary Price on this very set say they are very, very close to getting a product. The latest polls suggest there's a softening here from the American public about the repeal effort. Repeal entirely, there you see a kind of a change, repeal parts, expand it, leave it as it is. And then this question, if Obamacare is repealed, it should be repealed immediately or repealed when the replacement is ready, and that seems like an overwhelming choice. Back with the panel. Tom, thoughts on Secretary Price and what they're saying versus what we're hearing on Capitol Hill?
Who knew this healthcare stuff was so complicated? You know, this is a problem for Republicans. They need unification on this issue. I don't think Secretary Price had enough details that, you know, to say that any of this stuff is worked out. If Republicans can get unified around a program, one plan, then they can shift the impetus to the Democrats, and they can start leveraging some of these red state Democrats, Joe Manchin and others. But unless and until they can unify around a plan, the pressure is going to be on them. And that's not where they want to be.
I mean, there are 10 Senate Democrats up for re-election in 2018 from states that Trump won by, 65%.
Well, that's their hope, to get the 60 votes they're going to need. But I do think the split among Republicans is partly a matter of ideology, partly semantics. What the Republicans have to do is to make sure that there are not a huge number of people who are hurt by the transition. That's the reason they are daunted. And the left has a genius for ratcheting up dependency and government largesse, and then daring Republicans, when they come into power, into undoing it because it's extremely unpopular. And they did gin up a system that is completely unworkable, but does have some who benefited, and some are going to lose. And I think what you have to do if you're a Republican, you have to forget about the bottom line. You have to forget about deficits for the short run. You must cover these people one way or the other, or you will have a PR and political catastrophe. Yes, you don't want to bust the budget, and it'll be a transition period, but you can't be counting your pennies now when there are going to be so many stories out there of people who are hurt and really hurting as a result of the reform.
Yes, the entire idea behind passing Obamacare was that once passed, it would be impossible to repeal. And the whole idea was that you could absorb short-term losses for Democrats so long as you increased the size and scope of the administrative state, ensuring that Democrats would be in power for a long time. The good news for Republicans is that that didn't happen. It was actually so poorly written. It has so many problems that polls have consistently shown that more people have been harmed by Obamacare than helped by it. Most recently, there was the Wall Street Journal poll showing that 30% of Americans reported harm versus 24% helped. That's a huge number that have been helped, but the stories of the people who have been harmed by it have been underplayed, and it's not just that coverage is limited, it's not just that things are more expensive, they're having to subsidize this whole class of people. So it's not just about getting the specifics right, it's also about getting the messaging right and pushing back against this notion that it's all been good news.
And I will say, Tom, that this death spiral thing for the program overall is real. These insurers have told lawmakers that they are pulling out this year because it's just not working. They're losing billions of dollars.
No, that's exactly right. And Secretary Price mentioned, I mean, costs are up, coverage is down. I mean, competition, it's a problem. The one thing I would add, though, is, you know, this battle among Republicans over the specifics of the bill, right, tax credits, that sort of thing, it's the perfect opportunity for Trump to step in and be the deal maker that he says he is, put these people in a room together and hammer out a deal that all Republicans can get behind. I think he might be the only person at this point who can do that.
President Trump says that he's going to sing from the same sheet of music as Speaker Ryan, that they're all going to work together. I think their biggest challenge is the Senate, Charles, where they have 52 votes, and they've got to convince these, you know, Senate Democrats who are up for re-election that it's in their best interest to do what the Republicans are doing.
I think that is doable. What it seems to be harder to do is to have the Republicans singing from the same sheet, and I think they're missing the point. The point is they need one plan. It is so complicated, as Trump has discovered, healthcare reform and healthcare economics, that nobody can predict with accuracy which of the plans will produce the outcome you want. Look at the predictions on Obamacare. It's not within a mile of what anybody, at least on the Democrats, had expected. So pick a damn plan, since nobody knows for sure which one is ultimately going to be the best. Be unified. Then you've got a political case to make to the Democrats.
Strong letter to follow.
Until it happens, nothing happens.
I should point out, in the Senate, they're going to do it by reconciliation. So they'll need 51 votes, not 60. But still, it's a question of timing here. Panel, thank you very much. Molly, the only one who made it to Church for Ash Wednesday. But next up, we'll see a young boy giving new meaning to the phrase fight or flight.